We have Jeffrey Luxmore, one of our graduates, doing a talk on the different paths you can take within software development. Thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Like she said, my name is Jeffrey Luxmore, and I am a graduate of the Tech Academy 2015. My understanding is today is our first in-person event since the before times. We have a handful of people here in person. There's a number of you online. I want to thank everyone for joining. Thank you for the people being here in person and getting the free food, free drinks. If you're online, you're missing out. What we're going to look at today is sort of the different ways you can go in your career as a tech professional. I've sort of like made three sort of general groups here: freelance, startup, and corporate. I want to encourage you all to ask questions along the way. Like some people wait till the end for ask questions. Feel free to like raise your hand, or we got Regina online hosting. She can see your questions if you're online. Try to get the question in the context. I'm happy to answer it then. There are no dumb questions. There are dumb questions, but everyone's allowed to ask them. If you have an interest in it, I'm happy to answer it. Also, I think one of my former classmates, Kent Gray, he was from Texas. I went to school with him here. He came and worked here for a while. If he's not online, he's not allowed to ask any questions. So Kent, if you're here, quiet. I'm gonna give you more information about me. I am now 6.5 years as a professional software engineer. That means 6.5 years of paid engineering work after graduating from the Tech Academy. People who come to the Tech Academy, of course, come from all different backgrounds. My particular background was over 7 years in the automotive industry. I worked in automotive dealers. I bought and sold cars between dealers. I'm not a shady car salesman, but I worked with a lot of them. And I was kind of a higher end manager in the dealership world where I worked. So I kind of took a big step back, stepped away from a really pretty successful career in the car industry to say, nope, I don't want to do that anymore. I came to Tech Academy. And last thing you need to know about me is I have one cat. This is actually a relevant piece of information because any information I give you is in the context of my lifestyle. So if you have, a spouse and a house and kids, that's just a totally different scenario than I'm in. And so some things that I say are like decisions I make, I really only have to care for this one small living being who I don't really like that much. And so just keep in mind that what I'm saying is really just for sort of my lifestyle. I also want to give you a little overview about what my software career has looked like so far. Danny just mentioned it, Ski Data. Ski Data was the company that I started at in January 25th, 2016. I went to the Tech Academy. I think I started in the beginning of August, maybe July of 2015. Sort of finished up through the end of the year and got my first job at this company called Ski Data. They do a number of things like parking access, ski access. So if you ever gone into a parking garage and you push a button, it gives you a ticket, the arm opens. They made a lot of that equipment. So I worked at Ski Data until I took a job at a place called All West Financial. All West Financial is in the car industry. And these were people I knew from my career in the car business. These two brothers, they started their own business. They said, hey, we want to build some tech for the car business. They recruited me. So I left Ski Data and went there. And then that thing happened, the global pandemic. And that company didn't survive. And that is sort of what led me to start my own single person LLC, just to become sort of a freelancer and do contract work and things like that. That was April of 2020. And after doing that for a little over a year, I officially jumped on ship to the startup called Trial. It was a healthcare startup. It was in the works for a little over a year when I joined, and I was actually doing sort of freelance work for them for the 6 months before that. And I started with them full time in August of last year. And then they were acquired by a company called Y Prime. And I've been working for Y Prime since February of this year. I put sort of approximate employee counts for each of these companies. So you can see like Ski Data is 500 employees. All West was a small business, essentially, less than 20 employees. Startups can be small. This one was indeed small with 7 employees, including the 2 founders. And then Y Prime, the company I work at, is now 250 employees or so. Just kind of want to do a survey. We don't have to be real formal about it, but just kind of sort of get your brains thinking about your life and what you want, things like that. There's no right or wrong answers, of course. But the first question is, would you prefer to work alone or on a team? So, like, there are some people, and for a long time I was like this, I don't want anybody around me. I don't want to smell their BO. I just want to work and do my own thing. That's fine. And there's other people, they're just like, oh, I want to like do pair programming, or like, I like hanging out. Like if you're working at McDanks, you want to work with your friend, that's fine. It's kind of a big sort of question that informs what you're going to do with your tech career. Another thing, and this one's really relevant now, and we'll talk a lot more about this, is would you rather have higher income or more job flexibility? I know a lot of you are probably coming from other careers where the motivation for getting out of what you were doing before is you want some more money. It wasn't explicitly my motivation, but flexibility was actually a big motivator for me when I came to the Tech Academy. Would you prefer a job you're comfortable with, or are you after a constant promotion? There are people who are just like, they're always thinking about the next step up, especially like in corporate, and things like that. It's like, oh, I'm going to be a manager in 2 years and be my manager's manager in 4 years. Is that what you want? Or you just be like, nope. I want this job where I code. That's what I do day in and day out. That's what makes me happy. And then the last thing I want you to think about is your work a source of pride or a source of purpose in your life? This, of course, varies from person to person. I myself, for a long time, have been like, you spend so much time working that it is important, at least for me, it's important that what I did, I felt proud about what I did with those 40, 50 hours a week. There are other people I know who are just like, I'm working the minimal amount of work, get my paycheck so I can go play pinball. That's my housemate, by the way. So just sort of keep these things in mind as we go forward. It's going to really, these are sort of the questions that really informed what I chose to do over the last 6.5 years. The other thing I want to point out is that, especially for you people who are in the Tech Academy now, or are recent graduates, or in your first job, a lot of these career decisions that we're talking about are not immediately sort of like relevant. You can't like do these today. Just like, oh, I'm going to go freelance, or I'm going to do this or that. These are going to probably come a little further in your career. Right now, a lot of you are probably focused on your first tech job, and as they told us when I was here, your first tech job is the hardest to get. And that, from everybody I've known over the years, that is absolutely the truth. And it's because you're not what my boss calls a known quantity, right? You're someone who says, like, I can code. I don't have any proof that I can code. No one's ever paid me to code, but you should hire me, right? So it's kind of it's like you've got to get your foot in the door. And back when I came here, Danny was the guy who would like coach us in interviews, and tell us the right things, how to answer questions and things like that. And you'll get all that support at the Tech Academy. They've done a great job. I had lots of classmates who got great jobs because they got great support at the Tech Academy and practice interviews. But your first tech job, does anyone know what, at least what I think, your central goal should be with your first job? I'm going to tell you. Get experience. Notice the razzle dazzle there. This is my first time using Keynote on Mac, so I wanted to use some of the fun animations. Get experience. That's really your number one goal, and that was my number one goal going into Ski Data. Is like, I left a job in the car industry that paid extremely well, and so when I took a step back, I said, okay, I need to get a job, and in 5 years, I want to be back to my salary was when I left the car business. And the way to do that is, of course, to get experience and work your way up. Not necessarily work your way up within a company, but like it's just how it works. You get more experience, you're worth more money. There is another goal that should really be central to your first tech job, and that is some more razzle dazzle here. Make connections. And again, Danny and everyone will tell you the same exact stuff. Networking. I think we got someone here mentioning he's networking. This is really a key component. And I want to point this out because you saw my list of jobs that was on the page I just showed you. I only applied for the first job. Every job after that, somebody said, hey, come work for me. And that was because of the connections I made. And I have had former coworkers and my best friend who make comments like, hey, when are you going to come work for this company I'm working with so we can work together? Or I have another friend who's like, hey, why don't you come work for this company I'm working with? I'll get a big hiring bonus if you come work there, you know? These are people I know. Like the idea of applying for a job and doing, you know, the whole hiring process seems kind of distant to me now because I haven't really done it too much because I've made those connections. What your first job, when you get in your first job or your early jobs or any job really, is these are the two questions that you should think about. And of course, these are going to sort of go back. These are going to go back to those survey questions we had. What do you like and what do you dislike? You may say, like, I don't like the coffee in this office. Great, make a note of it. You know, and then things you dislike. You know, like I dislike having a 7 a.m. meeting every day. Okay, make those notes. And just keep a running list. You don't have to like have a diary in your nightstand and write it every night. But like these are things you want to keep track of. And so with that in mind, let's talk about my first. Well, first let's talk about what a corporate job is. I just want to clarify what a corporate job is. And I'm using the term very broadly. And so this is a list, and I've sort of organized them by employee counts, a little fuzzy here, but you got this company AdParents with about 150 employees, all the way to Amazon on the other end with 1.6 million employees. And the reason I chose these companies is because I went on Glassdoor. I found companies that were hiring right now for tech positions in the Portland area. And I just picked some that were kind of all over the spectrum. Of course, you've heard of a number of these. The Northwest Education Association. I have a friend who works there not as a developer, but as a consultant. My best friend works at this company here, Corvell. They're a healthcare related company. Columbia, of course, you know, OHSU, you know, and Nike and Amazon, of course, you know. This is not the number of developers, of course, you know. Amazon says 1.6 million employees, but I think it's more like 4,000 software engineers. That's just, you know, the company size. It's an easy measurement. So a corporate job, when we say corporate, is really this huge range. It's just this massive range of size of companies. AdParents, for example, with 150 employees, you know, they're going to share some similarities to Corvell and Columbia. And some of those similarities might be structured environments. And this is true of the jobs that I've worked at and the stories all of my friends tell, because almost all of my friends are engineers, of course. And all of them have basically worked at just normal, I'm using air quotes here, normal corporate jobs. Structured environments mean, you know, things like meetings, right? You know, like I got Scrum stand up. Scrum's going to be pretty standard. You know, there's usually going to be some sort of schedule you need to adhere to. You know, like we worked in the Pacific or Eastern time zone. So that's kind of what your schedule needs to be. And also there are typically going to be a lot of processes. And there's a reason for this, of course, because if you have that many people, you know, even 150 people, you say, hey, you guys, let's just make some software. It's not going to go very well. You need processes to wrangle in that many people. And the company I work for, Y Prime, 250 employees, they have more processes than I've ever seen in my life. When I got onboarded in February, it was literally 30 hours of reading processes. And I had to test to them. I said, like, yes, I read this process. Yes, I understand this process, that kind of thing. It's a highly regulated industry. So that's kind of extreme end of it. If you were to get into, you know, some other industries are going to be highly regulated. If you're, you know, a jelly bean distributor, it's probably not very regulated. A lot of structure is going to come with basically all of these jobs. In terms of compensation, it's fair. And it's fair because all of these companies are competing with each other to hire you, right? Like someone who gets a job at Corvell could just as easily go get a job at Columbia and vice versa, of course, assuming that they have similar tech stacks, right? If you have the skill, working in one place or the other, you just do the math. Which one makes more sense for me? These companies have to compete, and so that's where pretty solid compensation comes from. Salaries good or better, and typically you're going to see really good benefits. The upside is probably everyone who is looking for the first tech job is going to end up in a corporate job. Corporate doesn't mean necessarily mean just like suits and ties and that kind of stuff. Just keep in mind it's basically any normal, I'm using air quotes for the people online, normal tech job. So that's why you're going to become a tech person, right? It's like you get this, you get the benefits of a pretty good lifestyle once you get into it. Another benefit, of course, is time off, and we'll talk more about that. It's kind of a central component of this whole sort of spiel we're talking about. And then I just want to highlight some of the downsides here is because these companies tend to be bigger and because they have these processes and all these procedures and these like schedules and meetings, it can be pretty easy to end up in a position where you're a cog in a machine, right? You're just one person of a bazillion, and if you got hit by a bus, wouldn't they notice that you quit developing software? Hopefully, but yeah, some of these get really big, and it can sort of feel like you don't matter sometimes. I've had a lot of coworkers or friends who have sort of felt that way. You're also going to end up with typically a narrower role. So like you're going to typically do one thing. You're not going to wear a lot of hats. You're going to be like, this is sort of my domain. You're going to become an expert in it. You're probably going to have limited influence, especially if you're new. If you're the newbie, you're going to be told what to do. I was told what to do, and I just sort of, yes, boss, okay. And boss, senior dev in that case, he's like, do this, do this. I'm just like, I think that's stupid. He's like, I don't care if you think it's stupid, do it. But at the same time, it's a great opportunity, and this is probably the best reason to get a corporate job, especially as your first job, is it gives you an opportunity to build skills. Like these companies know they need to hire people, and by younger I mean less experience, and so there's sort of a built-in structure of letting people learn on the job, right? Like a lot of you, you pay to learn these skills so you can get a job, but then at some point you get in a job and you can get paid to actually continue learning. It happened for me. I learned a number of languages, said like, hey, we're going to use this technology. You need to learn it. Okay. And I'm learning it. I'm getting paid to learn it. So let's talk about my first job, which is at Ski Data, and talk about the things I liked and the things I disliked. And these are going to vary from everybody. But first thing I liked was that I had a lot of autonomy. And this is probably not going to be the case for a lot of you. It just worked out the case for me. I was very lucky. I had, like I mentioned, I had a pretty high-level career in the automotive industry, so I had managerial experience. I've developed a lot of soft skills, and so pretty quickly they realized, oh, I can trust Jeff to take care of himself. The thing I disliked was Ski Data was behind the times. They were using old technology, so like you're working on something and you're just thinking like, this is dumb. Why are they still doing it this way? And it's just like you don't really feel good about that. You want to feel cutting edge and things, and we didn't feel that way. It was truly full stack work. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I got to do. So database all the way to the front end. The senior dev was insane. He was absolutely insane, and this is not a unique experience for a lot of people. He was from New York, and you knew he's from New York because every time he started a sentence, he was like, I'm from New York, and then he would say something really rude or mean or something. He tried to get our boss fired, and then when that didn't work, he tried to get his boss's boss fired, and that entailed trying to call and send letters to the CEO saying, you should make me the VP of technology, blah, blah, blah. Insane. Very difficult guy. Almost quit. Like I was on the verge of quitting when he just quit. And so that was kind of really, I was about a little over a year into Ski Data at the time, and he quit and just sort of like opened the world to me. It was really the best thing to happen to me. The guy is insane. Old school dev, like taught himself through the 90s, did a lot of great stuff, changed job basically every year or two, made a lot of money. But I think it's safe to say that probably a lot of these types of developers are sort of going away. I'm now a senior dev, so I'm the one who gets to be insane if I want to be. I was appreciated and respected. We're going to come back to this later. Everyone wants to feel loved, right? If you've never had a $75 steak from Ringside, that's how I got to have one, is because one day they said, Jeff, you were doing a really great job. Here's a big gift certificate to Ringside. Take someone. I went and had $75 steak. It was amazing. I couldn't justify it myself, but it was a way for them to show appreciation for the work. It meant a lot to me. Below market salary levels, of course. One of the things I want to point out for everyone in Tech Academy, and I'll put my Venmo in the chat so you can all tip me, is I was sort of like a trailblazer when it came to boot camp students, coding camps. So it's a little story here. My best friend, this was 2014, he kind of gotten tired of his job. He was like an analyst. He was like the best Excel programmer I know. And he was like, what should I do? And I just read in the New York Times that year, 2014, oh, there's these new things called coding camps. And you can go there and you can become a software developer and you don't have to go get a CS degree. And he ended up going to one in 2014 in Texas. I was actually in Texas working in the car business that year. And he got one. And then he came back, and it took him a while, actually. It took him, I think, 6 or 7 months before he got his first tech job after going to this code school, because it was a pretty new concept. And in 2015, when I graduated, it was still a relatively new concept, right? I think the guys, I was talking to some of my old classmates and the staff here beforehand, that I was in the first 100 or so students that came through the Tech Academy. And the guy at Ski Data, my boss at Ski Data, he did not want to hire me. I got hired because of the senior dev. The manager at Ski Data was just like, oh, he doesn't have a CS degree, blah, 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 right? But then the senior dev said, well, I get to make the decision. He hired me. And then after that, they're just like, oh, we can hire from code schools and we can expand our talent pool. After I got hired at Ski Data, there was 3 or 4 other students within the next couple of years that came from code schools. They quit seeing the CS degree as sort of a requirement. And that has expanded a lot since then. And that's why so many people coming to code camps, like the boot camps, like the Tech Academy, can get into tech and make good salaries and careers. And I just want to point, I'll get that Venmo to you guys. I worked on a small team. Like at the beginning, it was me and the senior dev. He was difficult, but I really liked. I'm more of a one-on-one kind of person, right? And so it was really a really good setup for me personally. After he quit, I lobbied hard and got my best friend hired. Me and my best friend working there for another 2 years. It's great. Excessive corporate bureaucracy. You're going to see this in big businesses. It's just kind of how it goes. Just like, oh, we need to leverage our core competencies, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. The company really focused on doing extremely good PowerPoints and extremely good Excel spreadsheets. In fact, I had a boss. This is funny. This German guy. This company was based in Austria. He'd just be like, Excel spreadsheet. He did. He actually sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger, even though he was German. And so I would make these beautiful Excel charts and stuff for him. I'd end up seeing him in these presentations that were really nice. And he was very successful within the company mostly because of me. I should send him my Venmo also. And the other thing that I didn't like is I didn't feel like my work had an impact on the world. I worked on a product for parking validation. I personally have never in my life had my parking validated. In certain regions, it's extremely common. Texas, Southern California, of course, Washington, D.C., New York. But like me personally, I knew what parking validation was, but it just seemed kind of, I don't know, bougie to me to go somewhere and be like, hey, park my car, I'll give you $2, right? And so I never did it. But that was what I worked on. I worked on software to make parking validation sort of a digital process. And so you just you go home to your wife and kids. I still don't have a wife and kids, but like, honey, how was your day? It's like, oh, I helped the guy park his car. You don't necessarily feel great about that. So these are sort of the things, and I kind of did this in retrospect. Like I wasn't thinking all this in 2016, 17, and 18. But these are kind of the things that this would be my list that I asked you to sort of keep track of when you're doing your job. Now I'm at another corporate job, and we're going to talk about how I got there. But this company is called Y Prime, and what I want to do is I want to compare that same list to my current job. And we'll look at the things that I liked at my first job and how they compare now. Autonomy, right? I have a lot less autonomy now. Like before at Ski Data, and this was a unique situation. They basically said, Jeff, do whatever you think is right. Here, I work in a larger team and I sort of have to fit within the processes. But it's definitely worse for me. It's red. And I put it red here so you can tell it's worse, but it's not the end of the world. It's full stack work again. When I was in the startup, I was writing mobile app code. And then when we got acquired, I moved to the backend team. And in just the last 3 weeks, I've started to build out our front end. So I've been relearning Angular, the newest Angular. So I'm like the whole stack. I was appreciated and respected at Ski Data. I still am here. I'm only saying that in case my boss is listening. I want another one of those ringside gift cards. No. The thing is, everyone's really great at this company, like ridiculously great. And they, they don't need to like, give me a virtual hug every day, but like, you're appreciated. Like I got some messages here from my coworker asking a question about something. I'm just like, oh, I'm busy right now. I'll get back to you in a couple hours. She's like, oh, cool. Like smiley face, right? Smiley faces are nice, right? And then I was on a small team at Ski Data. It's a larger team now. It's not that much larger. I'm really working directly with 2 engineers, 2 testers. My boss is sort of like the mini project manager. So there's a lot more interaction with people in other departments and other scopes of work. But I'm working with 2 people I really like. I've been working with a while, who I met at Ski Data. These are 2 people I met at Ski Data who work there. So, definitely some improvements here. Things that I disliked in my first job, company was behind the times, for example. This is something I saw again, but this company has already demonstrated they're like, no, let's modernize. Let's move. Let's do what we need to do to be a modern, do it things a modern way. At Ski Data, they weren't in the cloud. This was 2016. They're like, what's the cloud, right? And actually, that was what I did over the first couple years. Was I migrated the whole application to the cloud. The senior dev was insane. I am the senior now. Like, I am a senior dev now. My coworkers are senior devs also, but there's really nobody like in my first job when the senior dev would say, do this. And I'm like, why would I do that? He's just like, just do it in case, and nobody's going to tell me to do that. And if they tell me to do that, I'm be like, no, right? It's a great feeling. He's actually gotten more insane. Like, I'm not going to like advertise for him, but this guy has, I don't know if y'all know what emotional intelligence is. He has the opposite of emotional intelligence. And so what he did is he kind of went off the rails and he quit. I think he quit being a software dev and he started you may have actually seen him. He'll go to events in town and he'll put up like a cardboard box with like a little window, like Lucy from Peanuts. And it says like free advice. And you can go up and you can talk to him. And he has a TikTok where he posts advice about things like that, about like, this is why you're unhappy in your job, that kind of stuff. And it's just the most unhinged stuff I've ever seen. And it's like extra unhinged because I know the guy personally. If I see the guy around town, I've literally ducked behind a bush to avoid him seeing me. He's definitely still insane, to answer your question. Below market salary levels to Ski Data, Y Prime, they pay market salaries. And of course, you can tell if you're being paid market salary. There's a lot of tools out there. Glassdoor is a great one. Y Prime was a company who acquired us. One of the first things I did was I went to the Glassdoor and I was like, what do people say about working for the company? What are the reported salaries? Salaries great. Excessive corporate bureaucracy, they have some of that also, but they've also figured that out. I was in Philadelphia last month. They flew us all out there to sort of do like a tech summit. And we were having dinner. By dinner, there's like 40 of us at dinner. And I was sitting next to the CEO for part of the time. And he's just like a regular guy. He's just like, yep, yeah, no, I see what you mean. Yep, we're working on that, I said, one of the first things that I said to my boss's boss, he was just like, how are you liking it at Y Prime, after a couple of weeks? And I was like, a lot more meetings than I'm used to. We're working on that. It's already a lot less meetings. They've already sort of trimmed that down and said, like, let's be more efficient. So they're smart about that stuff. And then I didn't feel like my work had an impact. Parking validation, no one cares about parking validation. I am writing software now to help clinical trials. So A lot of you probably know about clinical trials now because of the pandemic. You saw the Pfizer and the Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they all went through clinical trials. There's a pretty rigorous process for how that works globally. And this company, Y Prime, makes software that helps people conduct those clinical trials. The startup that got acquired by Y Prime was in the clinical trial space. That's why we got acquired. And so when I'm writing software, what I'm doing is I'm building tools that are going to make clinical trials more inclusive, for example, and they're going to better serve people. They're going to help drugs get to market faster. Yes, we're going to help pharmaceutical companies make more money, but at the same time, we're going to help make sure that drugs, meet the needs of certain populations. So I feel good about that. Let's switch over to startups because that's where I was just at the beginning of this year. And I made this word cloud. I don't know if you can really read it. It just seemed like fun to make with like a bunch of words, big risks, and that kind of stuff. The biggest thing you should know about startups, and I think a lot of you know this, maybe if you've seen Silicon Valley is a lot about startups. There's been other shows about startups. I watched Silicon Valley before that guy got canceled, so it's okay. But the one thing you should know about startups is it's a big risk, big reward situation. The risk is, will this company survive, right? Does this company have enough runway? I don't know if you know what runway is. Runway is enough money to keep operating the business. So, when I was part of this startup last year, when we get updates, we got 6 months of runway. So you got 6 months of funding to get more funding, or there's no money to run the business, right? That's runway. So that's the thing that's always sort of on your mind. And then there's also the possibility that at any point they can just say, nope, the best decision is for us to just stop doing this. And you might read that in the news, like a company shuts, bolts their doors, and all these people are unemployed. It can happen. That's the risk. But the big reward is, equity. You have a chance to make a pretty good amount of money. Prestige. You can say that you're part of a successful startup. That's actually the first thing I put in my dating profile now. And there's a feeling that you made something. So we did make something, and we made something, and it worked, and a company bought it. One of the other big things about startups is that your individual performance really matters. And it matters because it can affect a lot of lives. I'll give you an example. We got this thing. We got 6 months of runway. We're pitching to all these pharmaceutical companies. I don't think I can actually say the names legally, but they're pharmaceutical companies that you would know. And this one was like, okay, we want to, these are the things that we're looking for. And so the boss is like, okay, we got 2 weeks until we got to pitch this company. How much can we build, right? And a lot of this was in the mobile app, and that was what I was doing. And I was like, okay, Jeff needs to build out this functionality in the mobile app by Friday after next so we can pitch it to this company so that maybe we can get some funding so that maybe we can keep this company going so that my coworkers don't lose their jobs also. That's a real scenario. And I remember for those 2 weeks, I worked a lot because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to let these people down. So, with startups, your individual performance matters. You can't just sort of sink into the crowd. I had another friend who almost joined the startup with us. She was a younger dev, and she realized that. She's like, no, it's too much pressure for me, right? There's the imposter syndrome. She had it. Everyone has it, of course. And she wasn't ready for that sort of level of stress. We'll kind of do another list here. Life in the fast lane. Of course, things are moving very fast all the time. It's always about, I put it here, chaotic. It's chaotic. It doesn't necessarily mean chaotic like you come to work and your desk is on fire, but it's just like things are changing all the time. And things are changing, like the example I just gave with the demo for that company is like, we're in the middle of doing this. It's like, stop what you're doing. We need to do this because this is more important. And things just are always like in flux. Like they had a meeting with this pharmaceutical company. Okay, we need to switch what we're doing and do this. There's this thing we call strategic jank. Like technical debt is a term that you all may know. It's like when you write bad code and you're just like, oh, this is going to come back to bite us later. You're going to spend energy and time to redo it. We put in technical debt intentionally because it was the fastest way to get our demos out. And those were decisions that we made. Like we knew we were making them at the time. But it's kind of like when you're in elementary school. Like remember being in math class and it's like, okay, you're doing your homework or you're doing a test, and you get the right answer, and your math teacher says, "You got it wrong. You didn't show your work, right?" This is not that case. This is the opposite case. This is like, I don't care how you get your work done. Show the result, right? That's like, we got to show this. So if you have to hack it in the back, you hack it in the back. And I've actually read stories about other startups. It's pretty interesting stuff. Like being like, they just put in like, this is a terrible idea, but we got to keep moving forward. And we had a lot of that. And then moving targets, of course, like I said, like we're always, it's like, what's coming next? You know, we don't know. Compensation package. This is for anybody who's thinking about a startup. This was my experience. It could vary. Is really it's about the equity, right? About the options and things like that. The salary, I took a below market salary. So like I looked at the salary in the Portland area. I said I could earn X amount of dollars. This guy was saying, well, I'll give you, 8% of that, but I'll give you, this percentage of equity in the company. So, that if you need constant cash flow at that time, that could be a little difficult to make that decision. And then the benefits vary. There's 7 employees, a company with 7 employees is not going to get a good deal on healthcare costs as a company with, 10,000 employees. Benefits were okay, but they weren't great. Like if I, go ahead.
Does equity like be to scale with when your company gets acquired by another one?
Yeah, so the question is about equity and how that works over time. So basically the way it worked for us is we got let's just say 1%. It's not uncommon to get 1%. And so the company has issued so many stock units, let's say 1 million stock units, then you effectively have an option to buy 10,000 shares, right? And there's a price for it. Like for us, the price was like pennies, right? So if the company took off and the stock share was $10 a share, I could buy 10,000 shares at 2 cents a share and then sell them immediately. That's kind of what options are. What actually happened in my case was the our shares were basically cashed out. The companies can do a lot of different things when they acquire a company with people with options. They can roll the options into the new company. The company I work for now didn't want to do that, so what they did was they essentially cashed out their shares. And so we all of us who had equity received a cash bonus. Great question. And then the last thing about startups I want to point out, I click on the right part here, is you really have to have an ownership mentality, because you really are an owner. Like if you have equity, you are an owner, right? It's not like having Amazon stock, right? But you are kind of an owner, and the success of your company, of the startup, is your personal success, right? So like if I do a really good job and this company does really well, I'm rewarded for that work. You also get to influence major decisions. The mobile app was written in the Flutter mobile app language, the cross-platform language. That was something I pitched. They did it. And then shared vision is you have to really believe. You have to like be on board with what you're doing. You can't. A lot of people go to where you're like, like if you work at McDanks, for example, right? Like people are stealing barbecue sauce packets. You're like, I don't care if people steal barbecue sauce packets. Well, it does matter in this case, like because that's your money they're stealing, right? One thing that you'll probably want to know is like, well, should I join a startup? That's a tough question. And I'll tell you how I decided for myself. Is the first thing I did was I evaluated the founder. His name's Dave Cholin, and I knew him from my previous job at Ski Data. Remember making connections. And we had done a lot of social events. He had gotten tickets to courtside at the Blazers one time. I went with him. We did a lot of stuff. And he had also started another company that was sold to Ski Data. So this guy had also started a company before and made millions of dollars selling it to the company I worked for. And then also, I personally want to know, okay, where's your funding coming from? Like putting skin in the game. He's a wealthy individual. He was a wealthy individual before the startup. He put his own money in. If someone is really invested in an idea, they're gonna put skin in the game, right? He put skin in the game. Next thing I did was I did my own market research. So some of you, this is kind of may not know how to do this, but you got to do it. And you got to understand what the startup is trying to do. In this case, it was with clinical trials. Like he explained it. I did a lot of research. How are clinical trials run, statistics, that kind of stuff. And I was like, holy crap, this is a game changer. Like I literally said to him, this was 2 years ago. I was like, this could be $1 billion company, right? And it probably could, but there's a lot of decisions that go into a startup like that I don't get to make. Like I don't get to decide to sell the company. Like I'm an employee of the startup. And there's a lot of strategic decisions. There's SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. They do that. But I had to do my own due diligence. So it's like, is this an idea that can actually be successful, right? So like if your Uncle Tony says, let's start a company, let's make, toasters for the bathrooms, I'd be like, that's not a good idea. Like I'm not going to get on board on that. And then the last thing is you have to decide what your risk tolerance level is, right? So I mentioned the lower income, and that may not be the case for all startups. Maybe you get, if you get a startup offer at some point, be like, hey, we're going to pay you well over market salary and you get equity. Great, right? For me, like I had to sort of like, I was actually working 2 freelance jobs at the time, both with the startup and this other company. And so it was actually a pretty big pay cut to come on board. But it was worth it. What's your plan B? Of course, like if you come in tomorrow and they just like, oh, nope, we canceled it. This company will no longer exist. Like what, there's a statistic that a lot of Americans don't have $400 set aside for an emergency. Like if that's your case, that could be a very risky situation, right? If your plan B is you can go live with your parents, it's a little easier, but like, for me, it wasn't. Luckily, I was in a financial position where I could take that risk. And also, what's your motivation? Why do you want to do that, right? Me, I just really wanted to build something that I could say I was proud of. Let's talk about the freelance option, because that's what I was doing. Sort of, I was freelancing for this company before I came in, and freelancing for another person. And if you're thinking about freelancing, the one thing you should really keep in mind, it's really like 3 jobs. Okay, so the first part of the job, which is probably the part you're just like, oh, I'm a developer, I can freelance. Yes, part-time developer. Second part of the job, part-time accountant. And then the third part of the job, part-time salesperson. And the reason that is so the development, like, that's the work that if you're freelancing, it's the work you probably want to do. It's development, right? So there's nothing really new there, though you do need to be self-motivated. Probably also need to spend a lot of time continually, stay up to speed on learning, right? Let's say you're a good React developer and you do freelancing, and then React library keeps getting better and new versions. You got to stay up to date on those versions. Whereas at a corporate job, they're like, oh, we're using this version. We're going to use this version until the end of the world. You don't need to learn new React stuff. You need to keep it up to date. And you also need to do good work, right? The accounting part is you have to do your own taxes. I don't know if any of y'all have done your own taxes before. I don't mean like taxes like your 1040. I mean like keeping track of your income and your profit amount, making estimated tax payments to the government, and your costs. Like if you spend $1,000 on some new hardware, that's a deductible expense, and blah, 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 blah. I had to get QuickBooks. I also had to buy my own benefits, right? So like I was on the Obamacare exchange. I had to buy my own healthcare. It was garbage healthcare, but I had to have some, right? You also have to invoice and collect payments, right? You have to send an invoice to a company saying, hey, like I did this work. You owe me $5,000. And then, some companies are kind of slow about paying, right? Keep in mind though, on that part, an accountant can help. You can pay for an accountant to help you with that kind of stuff. It gets very complicated, the tax stuff. And then on the salesperson part, and this is probably the part that makes me decide that freelance is not for me, is you have to find jobs, right? You have to sell your skills. You have to be really good at networking. I'm really good at networking within like a work culture, but like I'm not going to go to meetups and meet people and stuff like that. It's just not my personality, right? So you have to sell yourself. I do want to sort of talk just really briefly about the difference between contracting and freelance. And there's a lot of overlap there. Of course, contracting, you've probably seen job listings where like, this is contract to hire, something like that. A lot of times contract work is just like you're an employee, but you're paid on a 1099 or whatever, you just paid differently, right? Freelancing is almost more like gig work sort of thing. There's usually a little bit limited scope. You might do more work at once as a freelance thing. And contract is usually, at least my perception and my experience with other people talking about it, is contract is more like you're doing this one thing for this company for this amount of time, sometimes for a longer time. You might want to answer the question, is freelance right for me? And let's talk about some of the pros and cons. The pro is you can take only the work you want. Let's say you, like, I don't want to work on the front end. Okay, great, don't work on the front end. But now you have to find the work that you want, right? So you can choose what you want to work on, but you have to find that work still. You could take extended time off. And this is actually a key point. I did this during freelance. So 2020, we're all locked down, in COVID prison and stuff. 2021 rolls around. I get my COVID shot. I went on like 9 trips last year. I was just gone all the time. I just tell the guy I was doing work for him, like, I'm gonna be gone for 2 weeks. He's like, okay, I'm not his employee. He's not my boss. Like, yeah, I bill him for work, but I can do whatever the hell I want. But flip side is you have to be able to afford to do that, right? There's giving you paid time off. You have to save the money up yourself and afford to take time off. Salaries, like if you see a lot of contract work, you might see something like, oh, it pays $80, $90 an hour and stuff like that. That's just cash, right? They're not taking taxes out. They're not giving you benefits. That's just straight cash. So when you start doing the math, you're like, wait a second, $90 an hour sounds great, but that's not that much money, right? Like you got to take a big chunk off for taxes, which you have to manage, and you have to pay the government separately, or you end up in a situation where you write a $10,000 check to the government on February 14th, on Valentine's Day. I'm not saying I did that, but I did. And you also have to buy your own benefits. So like your healthcare, you're not going to get as good a healthcare as anyone else. My current job, I get pet insurance, right, at a discount. So my cat is well taken care of. I don't get that as a freelancer. I got to buy it myself. US-based freelancer is, and this is probably maybe a bad thing to say, but is more desirable. And in my experience with companies, we've also been like, maybe we should hire some freelancers or contractors to help us out. And we're just like, oh, we want somebody in the US, we want somebody in the time zone, we want somebody sort of speaks our language, right? Like sort of has a similar work culture, right? Like there's a cultural aspect to it. Like if I get thrown, like if I went to like Japan, for example, Japan has a work culture where like people like work themselves to death, right? Like if I went to Japan today and worked in Japan, I'm like, no, I can't do this, right? So the downside is freelancers work for far lower salaries in other regions of the world. So in the US, I looked up some stats for you. It's pretty interesting. North America, the average freelance service is $80 an hour. In Western Europe, $75. Eastern Europe and Latin America, $55 an hour. And then Asia Pacific, $28 an hour. So if you're an American wanting an American pay, you're going to expect $80 an hour, but somebody in maybe Malaysia might be doing it for $28 an hour. And you can see this happening if you go on, there's different sites like Upwork and Fiverr are two that I've really spent a lot of time looking at. Fiverr does a lot of like gig stuff, and freelance is typically a lot of freelance stuff is like design work. I had the logo for my LLC made on Fiverr. I paid a guy $25. Some kid in Jordan, I think, made it for $25, right? Did good work. I mean, I think he did good work. Some people think it looks, can't say it on here, but some people think it looks sexual. But yeah, you're going to be competing with people. So like if a company is like, okay, I could hire you in America for $80 an hour, or I can hire the best talent in say Argentina for $50 an hour, there's an economics decision to be made. And then the last thing is the pro is a feeling of independence. You're in charge of your own destiny. Like nobody can tell me what to do. The flip side is there's no safety net, right? And I have a friend who is a self-employed mental health provider, a therapist. She's self-employed, right? She's got no safety net either. She got like sick. She had to take like 2 weeks off from work, and then she had to go back to work. She's like, I can't afford to not work, right? There's no special benefits that you get like with a corporate job. Like right now, like when you can come here and break my leg and I got like coverage from work, then we're like, okay, Jeff, just chill for a couple of weeks, right? It's all covered. One thing I do want to point out is that you can often freelance while you're employed. And this is actually a really interesting idea. And I know people who do this. you have your regular job, and then on the side, you maybe do like smaller freelance work. This is a great way. If you think freelance is good for you, this is a great way for you to sort of see if it is for you. Like, can you handle the bookkeeping? Can you handle the, the taxes, the deadlines? Like, can you sell your skills to other people? That kind of stuff. Keep in mind, your current job may not allow it. So my current job, my employment agreement says I cannot do this. And if they do catch me doing this, they can fire me. So I don't do it, but I could if they didn't know. One thing that I think is very relevant probably for everyone here and online is this thing called the Great Resignation, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with it at this point. But it's the idea that everybody is leaving their jobs, right? And they're trying to do something different or better, things like that. And probably a lot of people at the Tech Academy are part of the Great Resignation, right? They were telling me that a lot of people enrolled when the COVID lockdowns happened. That's part of it too, right? Some interesting statistics. Can't read on the screen, but I'll read it for you. 73% of people want remote work. 54% say they're burnt out. 39%, this is my favorite, 39% want to be their authentic selves. I'm not sure what that means, but if you want to be your authentic self, maybe that's why you quit your job, right? And this is actually from, I think, Q1 of this year, maybe some last year. So this trend is continuing. Some more information about this is like reasons people are leaving their job. Like money, of course, no opportunities for advancement, felt disrespected at work. There's this really good Reddit subreddit called Malicious Compliance. And if you haven't read that, it's great. It's like people like feeling disrespected at work, and so they do something to sort of make themselves feel better. Because of childcare issues, anyone who's here in Portland knows that you probably can't afford a house, especially can't afford a house with one income. And if you're a couple and you have kids, the way you're going to probably survive here is with dual incomes. But if you got kids, you got to pay for, so like people are like, okay, if I can work from home, I could, split the childcare between the two of us, it works. There's a lot of other reasons on this list. It's just kind of a quick overview, but is that work is evolving. And there's two key things that I've seen over the last few years compared to the beginning. And the first one, of course, is remote work. It's here to stay, right? I think everyone knows. If any of you have been looking at job ads, you'll see remote work possible, remote work this, remote work that, right? And you can see it just growing. And like, I think we're looking at the purple and the green lines for tech, really. And there's some questions. I know Elon Musk tweeted the other day, like, if you want to remote work, you're not going to work at Tesla. Okay, whatever, Elon. You're going to lose talent, right? We saw that with the big Apple engineer last month or the month before. He was one of their leading directors of AI or something. Apple wanted people to come back to the office. He's like, I'm not coming back to the office. Now he works for Google, right? Remote work is going to stay, right? It's just going to happen. Another, and I should point out, Y Prime, the company I work for, so the had no physical office in Portland, and the company I work for now, Y Prime, has no physical office in Portland. They have a physical office in Philadelphia region. I was there last month. It's a ghost town. Nobody wants to go in. And they just accepted that. And what that means is, when it started, they're like, okay, if everyone's working remote, we can access talent from anywhere. And so I have coworkers in Alabama. I give them a hard time with his accent. I got a couple in Raleigh, North Carolina, people in upstate New York. There's a person I work with, a tester, who she spent years working for the company in Philadelphia area at the headquarters. Then during COVID, her husband got a job in one of the big tech companies on the West Coast, and they moved to California. She still works for the company. She works from home. Everyone works from home. The other big thing is that employees are looking for flexible hours, right? Like the idea of a 9-to-5 is grotesque, as they say. Nobody wants to sort of be locked down in those hours. And you could see some information here on how it increases productivity, like more flexible, blah, blah, blah. And I just stole that from somewhere, I don't know. But it's basically, you're seeing it everywhere, is that work hour flexibility is increasingly a very important thing for employees. And you'll probably see that in job ads too, flexible hours, that kind of stuff. You got to check in, you got to be at certain meetings and stuff. The company I work for has a sort of unofficial policy that you kind of just do whatever you need to do. Like if you're in the middle of the day and you're just like, oh, I got to go pick my kids up from school, my cat from the vet for me, you just do that, right? Like I had a message from my coworker from the startup who I work with still. And she's like, hey, like, can you blah, 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 this thing? I'm just like, oh, I'm out for a couple hours. I'll hit you up when I'm back in the office. Okay, no big deal. Can you imagine like working at McDanks and you're just like, oh, I gotta go. I got a cake I gotta pick up from Costco. And like, okay, you can pick up after your shift is done, right? It's a different landscape now. And so there's a lot of flexibility. And these flexibilities were definitely pushed by COVID, but they're here to stay. And that brings me to the sort of the last thing I want to say to y'all. And that is kind of what my goal is. And that is, maybe you've heard of the term a digital nomad. It's a pretty popular term now, but it's the idea that if you're working on a computer, you can really work from anywhere. So you don't have to have like a specific home, right? You could work from a beach, the mountains, whatever. And this sort of came about in January. So I wasn't sure I was going to make the leap from the startup to the corporate company, just because I'm working on a mobile app and they said, well, you're not going to be able to work on the mobile app anymore. It's a different technology. So I started applying to jobs at the end of December. And one of the funny things about being an experienced dev is it's so easy to find jobs, especially right now. It's just like, I had 3 job offers when I was ready, when the owner finally said, we need you to come to this new company. I said, okay. But all of the companies that I got really far along in the process with, one of them actually said this: we don't care where you live, right? They realize that to attract talent, like they can't say, oh, we only want people who live within 20 miles of where we live. It's just not a reality anymore. And these are companies that, one was a startup out of California, like Robinhood, but for Asia, I think. Another one was here in Portland, and that was kind of a bonus. They're like, oh, we like that you're local, but you don't have to be local. And the funny thing is, when I was applying for these jobs, I was in Ecuador. I'd spent a month at the beginning of the year in Ecuador, and they don't know, right? They just see I'm in a room on Zoom. They had no idea I'm in Ecuador. The next is that I think I've decided on corporate life, and I think this is an important point, is because, you know, we talk about some of the benefits of like freelancing is the freedom and flexibility. I think that's really changing. And so I can have sort of the security and the structure and stability of a corporate job, but still those benefits of being wherever I want, right? The flexibility, you know, I got more flexible working hours. I have I can take as much time off as I want. Unlimited PTO is one of my job benefits. But like there's been some changing motivations for me. So I am now, I'll tell you all, don't tell anyone else. I'm 40 years old now. And so like, you know, you have that sort of midlife crisis. Oh, what am I doing with myself? And I used to work a lot, like, and that's what work was part of my identity. And that sort of has changed pretty recently, especially after this, especially after the acquisition of the startup. You know, I got a pretty good payout from that, right? Like, I'm not Bill Gates or anything, but I mean, I don't really have to worry about money like the way a lot of people do. And that's, you know, I've worked for that. It feels good. And when that happened, I was just like, wow, like I don't want work to be my identity anymore. I want to do other things, right? I still need a job, you know, I still have expenses and stuff. And I don't want to spend all my money, you know, in the next 2 years. So I still need a job. So my motivations have changed. The other thing is, you know, there were some drawbacks about corporate life that I mentioned, you know, lack of influence, you know, kind of a cog in the machine. But as a senior level dev now, I sort of, you know, that kind of goes away to some extent, right? So I can get sort of that excitement of being in control of my own destiny, but still within a corporate environment. It'll take all of you some time to get there if that's what you want to do too. And then, so the last part of my goal here is I'm going to take a trial run. So in the fall, well, October 22nd is when I will be flying to Mexico, and I will spend 4.5 months in Mexico working remotely. Dave, that's my boss. If you're online, I'm sorry I haven't told you yet. So I'm going to see how it works for me. Does it work for me, right? There's a lot of people, digital nomads. You read the stories in the Washington Post, New York Times. We're like, oh, I went on a 2-week holiday. I realized I loved it, and I just kept working there. You know, like that's what I'm going to do. And maybe I'll come back. Maybe I'll go somewhere else. But the reason I want to do this is I want to do other things. It relates to my changing motivations is I want to do other things. I want to pursue some hobbies. Like I can kind of surf, not really, but like I can surf. If I go to Puerto Vallarta, I can surf. I can practice surfing and take surfing lessons. Hang 10, as they say. And then I can learn new skills. Specifically, I want to learn Spanish. I speak a little bit of Spanish. I've spent about a year and a half of my life living in Spanish-speaking countries, but I didn't really pick it up. So this is my opportunity to really like dive in and speak Spanish. And also, like I've recently taken up Latin dancing, and so like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take lessons here for 5 months. I'm gonna get down there. I'm gonna be like salsa king, right? So that's my trial run. And the reason I'm bringing this all together is like you gotta make a decision. Okay, corporate life, startup, that kind of stuff. Is if you're really sort of appealed to the freelance idea, the freedom and flexibility, the way the market has changed, you can sort of get that lifestyle without having to sort of take on a lot of the risks, like having to sell yourself, do all the accounting, that sort of stuff. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Of course, if you like startups, you could swap out this corporate thing with a startup, assuming you can get a startup job, right? You can do the same thing. Like I'm working for a startup wherever you want. There's a lot of opportunity for you all. And I think, especially the people who are coming into tech now, it's just going to get better and better in terms of like lifestyle and things like that. All the people before you, like the insane senior dev, they did a lot of the groundwork to get to here. I did a lot of the groundwork to get to here also. So it just takes an investment, but if that's any kind of lifestyle you want, you can probably get it with tech. So if you're investing in a career in tech right now, you're going to do well. I know you're going to do well. That's it. Thank you. Oh, one last thing. It's more razzle dazzle here. The cat's coming with me. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone online, too. Oh, okay. I want to see who has the silliest question. Please.
I think sort of as a generality here, would you say that how much of this is because you chose to go student route versus circumstances outside control just work out?
That's a great question. The question is like how much of my career so far I've planned versus how much just sort of happened, right? And a lot of it just sort of happened because of the connections I made, right? So the connection said like, hey, come do this. And it was a compelling argument. So I did it. With the startup in particular is when I made a strategic decision. I was just like, no, I want to do this particular thing. I could have gotten another job, no problem. The startup is when I probably made a decision like, I want to try this. I want to try this lifestyle. I want to see if I can do this. And now that I've sort of begrudgingly took this corporate job at the behest of the owner, I said, I'll commit to 6 months and then we'll see. I think I'm sold on it. You know, like I've sort of done a re-inventory of the things I want, the things I like. I'm just like, the place I'm at now I think it's gonna be a good fit for me to do what I want to do. If that changes, then I'm gonna make a strategic decision, right? But yeah, it's a mix of just sort of, as you're younger, you're just gonna take the opportunities in front of you. And then as you get older and more experienced, you get to have more control, I think. Oh, Kent. I do want to remind Kent that he's still ugly. That's a joke because he's literally like the most handsome man I know. All right, thanks, Kent. Oh, my what? No, I don't. So I know TikTok and YouTube and all that stuff. I have like no social media presence. I'm not. I'm just gonna live my private life. I'm like, No, you guys won't know. Maybe I'll come back next year and tell you how it went. I'll be like super tan, beautiful bronze color, and then you'll find out. But otherwise, no, it's all top secret. Oh, great. If you have any other questions, now's your time, or I'm gone forever. Well, shark might get me. Yeah. Great. All right. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone here. Thanks to everyone online. Oh, please.
Similar to what you said, people don't want to work the 9 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
There's also, I've also seen like this movement of wanting to reduce the 40-hour work week to like say 30 hours.
That's a great point. So the question is about like if I have any thoughts about reduced work hours, say like 30-hour work weeks or even things like that. I know people who have worked themselves into gigs where I have one friend, he works in Big Pink. He used to work in Big Pink. They work remote now. I was having beers with him recently. He was trying to recruit me. And he goes, I'm responsible for this one thing. He's a big corporate, so he has a small scope. He's like, I only work like 25, 30 hours a week. Like, good for you. You can find that stuff if you're lucky, but I think most people are going to want you to work like a normal schedule, like 40-ish hours. I know that if I don't log 37 hours in my timesheet each week, I have to do a timesheet as part of the corporate bureaucracy. If I don't log 37 hours, people are like, you only log 35 hours, like that could come up. There are other countries I think other countries have been talking about like reducing 32 hours to being like a normal work week. Maybe we'll get there. America's a work culture. I don't really see any big changes yet.
Share your question. What programming language?
Great question. Programming languages. Right now I'm using C#, SQL Server. We just started up Angular. We switched from MVC to Angular. I was using Flutter for most of last year for mobile app development. I was using React a lot, but really it's just going to be C#, Angular, and SQL Server right now. It's basically all of it.
And then, where are you going in Mexico? And then, have you ever worked two full-time corporate jobs?
I'm going to Puerto Vallarta, PV for short. And the reason I'm going there, it's the shortest direct flight to Mexico. So I want to minimize the stress on my cat. I was working all like 2 3/4 time freelance gigs before I joined the startup full time. And it's just more work than I want to do. You could definitely do it. Like, I mean, if you're working at McDanks and you want more money, you can go get a second job at BK Lounge, right? You want more money, get a third job at Wendy's. But it's that balance between income and flexibility, free time. And I've hit the point where just like one job's enough for me. My free time is pretty valuable.
My next question: what bootcamp did you graduate from Tech Academy?
Yeah, what boot camp I came? My boot camp was here at the Tech Academy, roughly July or August to December of 2015.
What courses?
Yeah, I think it's really different. They just really had one course at the time. It was like the developer boot camp, and it covered Python was in it, of course, C#, SQL Server, JavaScript. That was back when jQuery, everyone was using jQuery. Yeah, it was just one course at the time. But I specifically thought that I wanted to be like a .NET engineer, which is what I do now. So that was really my main focus when I was here. Great. All right. Hey, thanks everyone. Cheers.